I never thought I'd find myself in a situation like this. A simple trip to the grocery store turned into a battle against racism and entitlement. I never would have guessed that a Karen, of all people, would be the one to test my limits. Here's how it all went down. I was at the grocery store picking up a few things for dinner. It was a typical weekday evening, and the store was relatively crowded. I had just finished grabbing some produce when I heard a woman's voice behind me. "Excuse me," she said. "I need to get by." I turned to see a middle-aged woman with blonde hair and a sour expression. She was carrying a large bag of chips and seemed to be in a hurry. I stepped aside to let her pass, but as she did, she muttered something under her breath. I didn't think much of it at the time and continued on with my shopping. But as I made my way through the aisles, I kept running into the same woman. She seemed to be everywhere I went, always in a rush and always muttering something rude. As I was checking out, she appeared behind me in line. "You know," she said, "you're taking jobs away from hardworking white people." I was taken aback by her comment and didn't know how to respond. That's when I realized that this woman was a Karen, the type of person who always has to be right and gets upset when things don't go her way. I knew I needed to tread carefully, but I didn't want to let her get away with her racist comments. Karen continued to press her point. "You don't belong here," she said. "You should be working a real job, not taking money away from people who actually need it." I tried to explain that I was just trying to provide for my family, but she wouldn't listen. "You're taking money away from white people who actually need it," she said, her voice growing louder by the minute. The customers around us were starting to get uncomfortable, but Karen didn't seem to care. She continued to argue with me, making derogatory comments about my race and intelligence. I kept my composure and tried to explain that her accusations were unfounded. I pointed out that I was just as qualified as anyone else in the store, but she refused to believe me. The argument continued to escalate, and I started to worry that Karen was going to call the police or something. I was trying to remain calm, but I could feel my blood boiling. Karen seemed to be getting more and more entitled by the minute. She demanded that I leave the store and find a real job, and threatened to call the police if I didn't comply. I knew I had to act quickly, so I decided to take a different approach. I used facts and logic to prove that Karen's claims were baseless and unfounded. I pointed out that I had just as much of a right to be in the store as anyone else. Karen seemed to be caught off guard by my rebuttal. She was clearly no match for my logic, and the customers around us started to come to my defense. I stood my ground, refusing to back down to Karen's demands and insults. I kept my composure and used facts and logic to prove that she was wrong. I could feel the tension in the air as Karen and I continued to argue back and forth. The other customers in the store were starting to get uncomfortable, and I knew I had to act quickly. I pointed out that I was just as qualified as anyone else in the store, and that I had as much of a right to be there as anyone else. Karen seemed to be getting more and more entitled by the minute. She demanded that I leave the store and find a real job, and threatened to call the police if I didn't comply. I knew I had to put an end to this before things got out of hand. So, I decided to take a different approach. I calmly explained to Karen that her accusations were baseless and unfounded. I pointed out that her behavior was nothing more than a display of entitlement. Karen seemed to be caught off guard by my rebuttal. She was clearly no match for my logic, and the customers around us started to come to my defense. I could see the fear in Karen's eyes, and I knew that she had finally been proven wrong. I could see the fear in Karen's eyes, and I knew that she had finally been proven wrong. I could feel the tension in the air dissipating as the other customers in the store began to come to my defense. They cheered me on as I stood my ground and defended myself against Karen's baseless accusations. Karen tried to argue back, but it was clear that she was no match for my logic. She tried to salvage her argument, but it was too late. I could see the embarrassment in her face, and I knew that I had won. The customers around us started to applaud, and I could feel a wave of relief washing over me. Karen was left embarrassed and humiliated, and I was relieved that the situation was finally over. I thanked the other customers for their support, and then turned to Karen. I said, "I know it's hard to admit when you're wrong, but I think it's important that you realize your behavior was wrong and unacceptable." Karen seemed to be taken aback by my statement. She muttered something under her breath and then stormed off without another word. The other customers in the store praised me for standing up for myself and for standing against racism and entitlement. I felt a wave of pride wash over me, knowing that I had stood my ground and won the argument. He handled that Karen like a pro. It's crazy how entitled some people can be. Kudos to him for standing up for himself and for what's right. What a pain to experience this while at work, though. Can't some people just let others do their jobs in peace? To cut to the chase, my wife and I spent 4 years trying to get pregnant before the wrong side of 35. We are currently 33 and 33 respectively, and are blessed with a wonderful infant son. My wife has a younger half-sister that she has been in contact with for some time. The woman is entitled and toxic, and also her mother's favorite. We've refused to let her or my mother-in-law in the house since they both blatantly tried to make off with my wife's jewelry box a couple of years ago. The box contained a lot of valuable jewelry inherited from my wife's grandmother. Said jewelry is now in a safety deposit box, as per my suggestion. My wife and I had nearly given up trying to conceive when it suddenly happened. And we were ecstatic. After we found out we were having a boy, we started looking into names. I ended up suggesting the name of my Scottish grandfather, and my wife loved it. So that's the name we settled on. But we made the mistake of posting about it on social media. Well, no surprise to the stereotype in this mess. My sister-in-law was pregnant too, and was months further along than my wife and also having a boy. She decided to claim my grandfather's name for her own son, and not just the first name, but the middle name too. We called her angry over what she was doing, and she smugly told us there's nothing we can do about it, which she was sorta right. There was nothing we could do about it legally, as it's still not a crime to steal planned baby names. We realized that drama was exactly what my sister-in-law wanted, and she thought that by taking the name for herself, we'd not be able to use it. I laughed and told her that while what she did was unscrupulous and underhanded, we would keep our chosen name, and she could just deal with it whether she decides to go through with copying us or not. Well, my sister-in-law's baby daddy called me and said I was an unreasonable jerk for still wanting to use the name after Sil claimed it. I said she claimed nothing, and since we couldn't own the name, then neither could they. Before he ended the call, he threatened me by saying I'd be sorry if we didn't change the name. Then he hung up before I could respond. Months later, Sil had a healthy baby boy and names him my grandfather's name. We did not show up for the birth, both because of the pandemic and because we simply didn't care to be there. Sil called us wanting congratulations, but we told her we simply didn't care, and that if she was still insisting we change our baby's name, then she'd be in for some big disappointment because we were not. Sil demanded I put my wife on the phone, but it was already on speaker and my wife spoke up and said she agrees with me entirely. We weren't changing the name. Sil hung up on us, but soon started sending emails with text walls of names, even suggesting similar ones. I responded back that the name was from my grandfather, and that's why we were not changing it. She silenced, and we didn't hear from her again till after our own son was born. 2 months later, we were blessed with our son. He came out perfect, and we named him just as we intended. No surprise, my sister-in-law called us a few days after the birth to yell at us that we copied her son's name. I pointed out to her that she was the real copycat since she had no familial ties to the name, and we did. Anyone who looked at our family trees could see that. Then my wife spoke up and said that after the attempted theft of her grandmother's jewelry, she no longer considered her sister-in-law her sister and would have nothing to do with her nephew either. For months, we were bombarded with messages and emails from my wife's side of the family. Half were on our side after finding out the whole story, and the other half were not. Sil's baby daddy, true to his word, showed up at my door to make me sorry. I'm not sure what his plan was, but I pretty much towered over him. I'm 6'1" and well-built from regular exercise and 3 trips to the gym a week. He, on the other hand, was very skinny and about 5'6" inches with a baby face that was badly hidden by a slim beard. I told him my house has cameras and to get off my property and never come back. He just yelled a few obscenities at me and drove off in his beat-up old car. Sil and Mill called us from a different number to yell at me for making Sil's baby daddy feel emasculated. I didn't even threaten the man, just told him to leave and not come back. And if he didn't want to feel emasculated, then he shouldn't have come knocking. Then they tried to bring up the issue of the baby name again, and demanded we change our son's name as he's so young, so there's still plenty of time to do it. We held our ground and told them that they were crazy to still think they were in the right after they copied our choice of name just to try and get one over on us. I said Sil didn't name her son out of love, but out of spite just to try and stick it to my wife for no good reason. Then my wife called them both out on the way she was treated growing up, how entitled Sil and Mill have always been, and how she was glad to leave them far behind, and she wants nothing from them, and they won't have anything from us. That left Sil sobbing, and Mill called me a jerk before hanging up the phone. That was no contact again for a little while till Sil called us again sometime later to bitterly tell us we'd won. She and her baby daddy got in a huge fight and he left. He was apparently very sore that Sil didn't let him even give their son a middle name from his family, and he said he was sick of the drama and wanted his son named after him and not some guy he wasn't even related to. Sil finally caved and they got the boy's birth certificate reissued with a completely new name, which cost Sil around $500, or so she claims. Sil then demanded we at least compensate her for the name change, plus another $100 for the emotional damage, as now she's going to have to get used to calling her son by a different name. We laughed and said this would have never happened if she hadn't stolen our baby name to begin with, and we didn't owe her anything. Since then, we've been no contact with Cil and Mael, but my Phil, who is a very nice man and divorced from Mel for obvious reasons, would come by often and loves his grandson. From what he and other relatives told us, the situation between Cil and her baby daddy was pretty tumultuous. But we don't care. Not our monkeys, not our circus. Wow, what a wild ride! I'm glad this couple stood their ground and didn't let their toxic family members ruin their joy of becoming new parents. And seriously, who tries to steal someone's baby name? That's just low. Sounds like they made the right decision to cut those toxic people out of their lives. Congrats to them on their beautiful baby boy. I, 31F, have two sisters, one older, 34F, NS, narcissistic sister, and one younger sister, 28F, LS, little sister. For as long as I can remember, NS made it clear she hated me. She would always snap at me, tell me to go away if I ever approached her, and would bully me a lot. It wasn't until I was in nursery that my parents realized that there was something not 100% right with me. After taking me to some therapists, it turns out I had minor Asperger's, though the actual diagnosis didn't come through until I was 13. Still, my parents did everything they could to ensure I was getting all the help I needed. Basically, I would struggle to concentrate, was very stubborn when I didn't want to do something, would throw tantrums, and was more sensitive when it came to emotions. I wasn't a bad kid. My mother would always say I was a monkey. Now that I think about it, maybe it was because NS couldn't understand why I was acting less normal that she didn't like me. But then again, it doesn't excuse all the crap she's put me through for 30 long years. Then, LS came along, which really only made my situation worse. NS and LS became very close, but excluded me purposely from the things they did. They would always whisper horrible things behind my back, go out together without me, make nasty comments and jabs towards me, like saying, I'm not part of the family, or favorite child. LS basically became NS's little follower, but really because it was likely she was scared of NS, since NS knew how to be intimidating. She just had this way of making her presence known, like that theme song whenever Darth Vader would enter the room, you'd feel the atmosphere change. She would often walk by my bedroom door and leave scratches on it, pretend she was talking on the phone to her friends whilst making horrible comments about me in the same room, blame me for anything that went wrong for her. One of the things I remember was when she and Mom had a big argument, and when she walked past my bedroom door shouted, mentally challenged daughter, despite having nothing to do with it. Oh yeah, and she blamed me for the death of our pet dog. Basically, my parents got this dog from a puppy mill years prior, and unfortunately, the dog had health issues which are common for its breed type, so it had to be put down. So really, I had no idea why she would blame me for harming a dog. Things got worse as we entered our teenage years. NS's attitude was awful, always angry, snappy, and aggressive. Despite being a teen myself, I could never find a way to stand up to her because already due to the trauma I had to endure, I was honestly scared to confront her. She was like a grenade, really to explode. Even sitting at the dinner table for a family meal was really hard since whenever I would try to speak up during a conversation, right away NS would roll her eyes and make a horrible face. So I began avoiding family meals in general by hiding upstairs in my room and only waiting for the family meal to end before I would come down and grab myself a plate. One time I tried to go up the stairs, but she purposely blocked the way, so I tried to shove past her, only for her to kick me in the stomach. She even blamed me for getting her phone wet because she stupidly left it by the sink. At this point, I began to realize what kind of person she really was. She could never find a fault with herself, always blaming someone else for her problems or mistakes. I will say, I never felt happier once she moved out, as things at home felt more peaceful, and I no longer felt her threatening presence nearby. Of course she would come and visit now and then, but now had this entitled attitude where she felt was above everyone. She would never clear up after herself, despite living in the same house for years. Would act like everyone should cater to her just because she was a guest. The tension between us did calm down a little, but we were still nowhere near friends. Then she was engaged. So I decided maybe it was time to leave the past behind and attempt to reconcile with her on some level. I tried acting nice and interested in the wedding, oh yeah. She never invited me to her bachelorette party, but was more than happy to invite my younger sister. To be fair, I probably wouldn't have enjoyed it, but still, I kind of wish she had made the effort to do something with me and my younger sister. So, the night before her wedding, NS was crying for some reason. No idea why. Trying to be the better person, I comforted her. Then came the next day. Things went smoothly getting ready for the wedding. We had our pictures taken. Then it was time to head into the cars towards where the wedding would take place. While NS, Mom, and my younger sister all went into the main wedding car, I had to go into the other car where all the in-laws were. I know this could have been a simple, there wasn't enough room in the car excuse, but still, at the time, I honestly felt hurt with the idea that all three of them were together, once again being excluded. I felt like I wanted to cry during the car journey, that all the effort I put into trying to build somewhat of a relationship with NS was just thrown away like that. I don't know how I did it, but I managed to put on a smile and acted like I had a great time. As soon as it was over, I broke down. I spent 2 weeks in bed crying my eyes out, questioning my existence, imagining what would be if I decided to end things. It was really a dark moment for me. I stopped talking to her after that for a while. Anyway, she has 2 kids who I absolutely adore. Because I still live at home with my parents, they asked me to help watch them. I did lots of fun things with them and would post videos of us having a great time whilst their parents were working. I could see on the video that NS was, in fact, watching them, but would never bother to say anything about it. Not even a thank you. So I realized there was no point putting the effort in and just stopped doing it. At one point, she and Dad got into an argument simply because he was hugging the kids a little tightly. Basically, NS would always yell or snap at us for doing anything wrong. She even started yelling simply because there was a hair on the toilet. Since NS and her husband would work at the same time, once a week my father would pick up the kids and bring them to our house to spend the day with us. By this point, my father had enough of her rudeness and refused to speak to her. There was a standoff between my father and NS for a while, before finally my father decided, for the sake of family, to put an end to the feud and give in. So basically, NS won the battle. Then came the Mother's Day incident. I decided to make a lovely afternoon tea for my mother and spent the last month preparing it all. I actually went through our photo box to find all the photos I could of my mother with her daughters. I sent them to a website that will print the photos and send them through the post. I set up the table beautifully and spread the photos out across the table. I made sure there were bagels, cakes, and all kinds of food on the table. What I didn't realize was that during the setup, things between my dad and NS were tense, since NS wanted Dad to help her get another house due to concern for the rising price of a mortgage. Meanwhile, Dad, who has worked as a landlord for years, felt her ideas were not in her best interest. Anyway, I invited everyone over for the tea to make my mother happy. I felt so proud of myself seeing how happy she was, but as soon as NS entered the scene, it all crashed. Basically, Dad mentioned his concern to NS about her decision, which sent her into a crying rage to the point my mother had to comfort her crying mess of a daughter. She ended up leaving with her kids, and thus, the whole atmosphere was ruined. My mother and I were both crying after seeing how all my hard work to make my mother happy was completely ruined. I never got an apology from NS. Anyway, I began getting into painting and made some beautiful portraits for the house. I made one for LS as an engagement present, basically a mannequin wearing one of Alexander McQueen's dresses, but in a different color scheme. Soon enough, NS asks me to make something for her kids for Christmas. So I got to work making a pair of beautiful ballerina paintings on canvases. On the day I went to show the girls what I made for them, not one word from NS. I still have the paintings here since I need to finish covering them with varnish, but NS has made zero effort to ask of the paintings, nor made any comments on them when posting them up on my Instagram. I don't wish to ask her since I'm afraid she'll ask me to make another, which I really don't want to since it will cost me money, and I'm currently trying to save up for New York. This has left me feeling like my motivation for doing any art has gone out of the window. I haven't painted much since and just feel broken inside. Recently, I just received my certificates for my qualification, and while her husband had left a comment congratulating me, not a word from NS. At this point, I've had enough and decided, screw it, she doesn't want to make any effort, then I won't bother with her. She's expecting her 3rd child, but honestly, I don't want anything to do with narcissistic sister or her family. Since she and little sister are so close, then maybe it's time for little sister to take a step and help out more. The same girl who would run away whenever a dirty nappy would be changed, lol. While I helped out a lot because I happened to work in a career with caring for small children, basically narcissistic sister has just used me and everyone in her family because of her self-indulgent entitlement. It is because of her that I have spent some time going in and out of counseling due to on and off depression, feeling like I constantly have to build myself up to reach a certain level of standards because of how she looks down at me. But in reality, Mom, Dad, and little sister can't stand her. They hate who she is as a person, just want her to get on with her life, but put up with her for the sake of her kids, which I feel she's always dangling to get her way. I honestly don't know why I kept trying to cling on to this hope of both of us reconciling. It's like a mental illness, always hoping one day she will turn around and apologize and try to be a better sister. I know it may sound stupid, and now that I think about it, I had been foolish following this false hope for a long time. I've mostly done things for the sake of my parents, since both are hard-working and are the kind of people who don't want to get into long, ongoing conflicts. Often they will get into an argument, have a standoff that lasts for a while before giving in. It really frustrates me when it happens. I do love narcissistic sisters' kids, by the way, but I'm getting worried my hatred and frustration towards their mother will end up affecting our relationship. I've already blocked her from my social media. I honestly don't know what I'm going to do when the new baby comes. Mom and Dad will probably drag me into looking after the baby for their sake, but I don't want to do anything that's related to narcissistic sister. I want her completely out of my life for good. As for little sister and me, we're in a much better relationship now. Turns out narcissistic sister and little sister have had their share of arguments, but as Mom says, little sister tends to feel intimidated by narcissistic sister. Yet, little sister has told me herself not to do anything for narcissistic sister, yet still hangs around with her. I find this weird. Since I've blocked narcissistic sister, NS, on social media, I've been feeling so much better not having to see her Instagram icon look through any story I'd post. I also feel like some weight has been lifted off my shoulders. I've come to the realization that at the end of the day, I don't need to follow anyone else's standards or feel put down just because they feel I do not reach their standards, but rather I should just follow my own. That's probably why I've been feeling like crap for a long time and why NS has been such a jerk to me all these years. Because in her warped ideal view, anyone who doesn't act, do things, or have the same interests as her is pretty much dirt. Honestly, thinking about it now, it's quite sad someone thinks that way. I've recently spoken to my aunt about it, who actually agrees with what I need to do. Turns out some family members do in fact know what she's like as a person, but keep with the she's family excuse. Thankfully, they're not the type of people to force me to make up with her, though there are few tiny hints they'd hope we will. It really kind of infuriates me that they'd bring this up with me, yet never bring it up with NS, but probably because they'd know she'd turn on them. Funny enough, my aunt mentioned the possibility that if anyone turned on NS, she could turn around on them and stop the kids from visiting. So at least there is some awareness happening. I guess they're honestly too scared to say something to her about her crappy behavior. So maybe it's time I led the example and show everyone that one person in the family doesn't have to put up with her crap and move on. I don't think my lack of contact will affect NS much, but I'm betting things will change when NS has her third child in the summer. I think when she realizes that I won't be around to help, well, some things might happen. The problem is, she'll most likely turn to Mom and act like I'm the jerk. Honestly, I don't care anymore. She's got another sister, maybe start asking her instead of me. Oh yeah, and she tried to make a hint about coming to my workplace. I work in a nursery. Ha ha, no, she won't be welcomed. My work team, great people, all know the stuff she's done to me and even seen me have breakdowns at work because of her. So, yeah, no place for her. But anyway, I honestly have been feeling a lot better about myself lately. I feel like I can just accept who I am and want to keep focusing on it. Last night, I was invited to a friend's birthday party and met a bunch of people I've never seen before. Some I already knew, but decided to take the step forward and introduce myself to a bunch of other people. They were super nice, and I honestly had a great time talking to them. It's so unlike me since, usually, I struggle to talk to people in big crowds, but this went really well. It's really boosted my self-confidence. I'm also looking forward to my trip to New York next month with my friends. God, I'm so excited. We've made plans on what to do for the number of days we are there. Can't wait. I've also been working extra hours and babysitting to save extra money for the trip since New York can be super expensive out there, plus tax. Wow, what a tough situation to be in. It takes a lot of strength to cut toxic people out of your life, especially when they're family. Good on them for focusing on their own happiness and not letting someone else bring them down. And congrats on their upcoming trip to New York. That sounds amazing.